The morning shift alarm echoed through Mining Station 7 as thousands of human workers prepared for another day, extracting precious metals from the asteroid belt. Tom Bradley wiped grease from his hands and looked out at the endless field of floating rocks that had been his home for the past 15 years. He never imagined this would be his last day here. Humanity had served the Galactic Federation faithfully for 200 years. They built the space stations, mined the asteroids, and maintained the massive ships that carried the three ruling species across the galaxy. The crystalline axiom controlled trade and banking with their perfect mathematical minds. The gas-dwelling Nebulans managed atmospheric processing and terraforming with their mastery over weather systems. The hive-minded collective coordinated massive construction projects with their billions of worker drones. Humans did the dirty work that none of the superior species wanted to touch. That morning, everything changed. Red emergency lights began, flashing throughout the station as Federation security forces materialized through teleportation beams. The Axiom soldiers moved like living glass sculptures, their crystalline bodies reflecting the alarm lights in rainbow patterns. Behind them floated Nebulan commanders in their environmental suits, their gaseous forms swirling with angry colors. All human personnel report to Cargo Bay 7 immediately, the station's AI announced in the cold mechanical voice that had governed their daily lives. This is not a drill. Compliance is mandatory. Tom joined the flood of confused workers moving through the corridors. Thousands of humans packed into the massive cargo bay, from young apprentice miners to gray-haired veterans who had spent their entire lives serving the Federation. Children clung to their parents' legs while their mothers and fathers exchanged worried glances. An Axiom official stepped forward, his crystalline form towering over the crowd. When he spoke, his voice resonated like struck glass. By order of the Galactic Council, all human citizens are hereby stripped of their Federation membership effective immediately. You have been classified as a security threat to galactic stability. The crowd erupted in shocked voices. What threat? Someone shouted. We've served loyally for centuries. Your species has developed unauthorized communication technology. The Axiom continued without emotion. The quantum resonance transmitters you created bypass our controlled information networks. This represents an unacceptable challenge to Federation security protocols. Tom felt his stomach drop. He knew about the breakthrough Dr. Nina Volkov had achieved on Earth 6 months ago. She had found a way to send messages instantly across any distance using quantum entanglement principles. The technology could revolutionize communication, but the Federation had banned all research into independent FTL communication decades ago. You will be relocated to the Outer Rim territories beyond Federation space, the Axiom announced. Transport ships are being prepared. You have 1 hour to gather personal belongings. No technical equipment or data storage devices will be permitted. The next few hours passed in a blur of panic and desperation. Families were separated as different groups were loaded onto different ships. Tom found himself aboard an ancient cargo vessel called the New Hope, along with 3,000 other workers from his station. The ship had been designed to carry mining equipment, not people. They crowded into the cargo holds with barely enough space to lie down. Robert Hayes, the ship's human captain, gathered the passengers in the main hold. He was a weathered man in his 60s who had commanded Federation cargo runs for 30 years. His voice carried the authority of experience as he addressed the frightened crowd. I know you're scared, Hayes said. I know this seems impossible, but we're not dead yet, and as long as we're breathing, we keep fighting to survive. Through the small viewports, Tom watched as hundreds of similar ships filled with human refugees began moving away from Federation space. The great space stations they had built grew smaller behind them. The mining facilities where they had spent their lives became tiny dots of light in the darkness. The Axiom had given them outdated ships with minimal fuel and basic life support systems. They expected the humans to die quietly in the empty space between galaxies. No rescue missions would come. No trade ships would find them. They were being sent to the dead zone, where even light from distant stars barely reached. As they traveled deeper into the void, reports came in over the emergency channels. Earth itself had been declared a quarantine world. Any attempt to return to Federation space would be met with immediate destruction. The three ruling species had frozen all human assets, confiscated their technology, and erased them from official records as if they had never existed. On the third day of their journey, Captain Hayes received a final transmission from Earth. Dr. Volkov's voice crackled through the static as the distance between them grew too great for normal communication. To all human ships in exile, her voice was steady despite the circumstances. They think they have seen the last of us. They believe we will fade away into the darkness and be forgotten. They are wrong. Tom listened along with everyone else as the brilliant scientist continued. We have something they don't understand. We adapt. We survive. We find ways to turn weakness into strength. They gave us the greatest gift possible by forcing us to unite as one people with one purpose. The transmission began to fade as they moved beyond the range of conventional communication, but Volkov's final words carried a promise that would sustain them through the dark years ahead. This is not the end of humanity's story. This is just the beginning of a new chapter. One day, we will return. And when we do, we will not come as beggars asking for acceptance. We will come as equals demanding respect. The signal went silent, leaving them alone in the vast emptiness between galaxies. Around Tom, families huddled together for warmth and comfort. Children asked their parents when they could go home, not understanding that home no longer existed for them. But in their eyes, Tom saw something the Federation had not expected. Instead of despair, he saw determination. Instead of surrender, he saw defiance. The ruling species had made a critical mistake. They had not destroyed humanity. They had only made them stronger by giving them a common enemy and a shared purpose. As the New Hope and her sister ships disappeared into the cosmic void, carrying millions of exiled humans toward an uncertain fate, the galaxy behind them began to change in ways the Federation could never have predicted. The workers who had kept their civilization running were gone, and the cracks were already beginning to show. 50 years had passed since the Great Expulsion, and death had become humanity's closest companion. Emma Torres pressed her face against the observation window of Haven Colony and watched another funeral procession moving across the asteroid's surface. The bodies were wrapped in recycled metal sheeting because they couldn't spare fabric for burial shrouds. In the void between galaxies, every resource was precious beyond measure. The colony consisted of hollowed-out asteroids connected by pressurized tunnels. 8,000 humans called this place home, though survival would be a more accurate word than living. The asteroid drifted around a dying red dwarf star that barely provided enough energy to keep their fusion reactors running. Outside, the temperature dropped to nearly absolute zero. Emma had been born here in the dead zone. She had never seen Earth or the green worlds where her grandparents once lived. Her parents, like most of the first-generation exiles, had died, young from radiation exposure and malnutrition. The weak and sick didn't last long in the void, but those who survived grew stronger. Emma could work for 16 hours straight in the mines without getting tired. Her lungs could process the thin artificial atmosphere more efficiently than anyone from the old Federation worlds. Her body had adapted to the low gravity and constant radiation. She was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Another transport from the outer ring just arrived, her friend David Kim announced as he entered the observation deck. His family had been engineers before the exile, and now he maintained the colony's life support systems. They lost 3 ships to the cosmic storms near Sector 7. The scattered human settlements had learned to communicate using modified versions of Dr. Volkov's quantum resonance technology. What had started as a simple message system had evolved into something far more sophisticated. They could now coordinate rescue missions across thousands of light years and share resources between colonies that would otherwise have no contact with each other. Admiral Kate Morrison's voice crackled over the colony-wide communication system. She had taken command of the Free Human Alliance after Captain Hayes died in a reactor accident 10 years ago. Her headquarters was aboard the Determination, a massive ship built from salvaged exile vessels and asteroids, citizens of Haven Colony. Morrison's voice carried the authority of someone who had been fighting for survival every day of her adult life. I'm calling a general assembly of all settlement leaders. We've made a breakthrough that changes everything. Emma. joined the crowd gathering around the main communication screen. Morrison's face appeared, weathered by decades of hardship, but still fierce with determination. Behind her, the bridge of the determination buzzed with activity, as hundreds of technicians worked at stations built from scavenged Federation equipment. Dr. Ben Torres and his research team have completed their work on the Quantum Portal project, Morrison announced. We can now transmit matter instantly across any distance using quantum entanglement principles. The crowd fell silent as the implications sank in. Torres himself appeared on the screen, a thin man with prematurely gray hair from working with dangerous quantum fields. He held up a small device that looked like a crystalline cube surrounded by metal rings. This portal generator can create a doorway between any 2 points in space, Torres explained. The Federation's ships still take weeks to travel between star systems using quantum tunneling. We can now step through a portal and arrive instantly, anywhere in the galaxy. Emma felt her heart racing. For the first time since the exile began, she saw hope in the faces around her. They had not just survived in the void. They had grown beyond what they once were. While the Federation remained trapped by their old technology, humanity had leaped centuries ahead. Morrison continued the briefing with intelligence reports from their hidden agents still embedded in Federation space. The news was better than they had dared hope. The removal of human workers had created a crisis that the ruling species couldn't solve. Mining operations in the outer territories have dropped by 70%, Morrison reported. The Axiom mathematical models can't account for the human intuition that made their extraction processes efficient. Nebulan atmospheric processors are failing because they don't understand the maintenance procedures human engineers developed. The collective's construction projects are stalled because their drones can't adapt to unexpected problems the way human workers could. More importantly, the three ruling species were starting to blame each other for the crisis. The Axiom claimed the Nebulans had pushed too hard for the human exile. The Nebulans accused the collective of manipulating the council vote. The collective insisted that both other species had been too dependent on human labor from the beginning. Cracks are showing in their alliance, Morrison said with grim satisfaction. Their economy is collapsing, their infrastructure is failing, and they're too proud to admit they need us back. Dr. Torres activated a holographic display showing the Federation's territory. Red warning indicators marked dozens of failed colonies, abandoned mining stations, and trade routes that had been closed due to maintenance problems. We're not going back as refugees begging for acceptance, Torres announced. When we return to Federation space, it will be as conquerors offering them a choice: surrender or face the consequences of their actions. Emma looked around at her fellow colonists. These were people who had been forged in the crucible of absolute hardship. They had learned to survive in conditions that would kill most Federation citizens within days. They had developed technology that made the ruling species' greatest achievements look primitive. Most importantly, they had united as one people with one purpose. The first generation exiles had died cursing the Federation's name. The second generation, people like Emma, had grown up knowing only struggle and sacrifice. They didn't remember the comfortable lives their grandparents had lost. They only knew what it meant to fight for every breath, every scrap of food, every day of existence. The tests begin tomorrow, Morrison announced. Selected volunteers will make the first portal, jumps to scout Federation territory. We need to know exactly how much their civilization has declined and which targets will give us the most strategic advantage. Emma stepped forward without hesitation. I volunteer. Hundreds of other voices joined hers. These were the children of exile, raised in the void, harder than diamond and twice as sharp. They had no nostalgia for the Federation worlds because they had never known them. They felt no gratitude toward their oppressors because they had never benefited from their Procy. As the assembly ended and people returned to their duties, Emma stared out at the dying star that had been her sun for 25 years. Soon she would step through a portal and see the galaxy that had tried to erase her people. She would walk on worlds where humans had once begged for scraps and been grateful for any work the ruling species would give them. But she wouldn't be begging. She would be taking inventory of everything that now belonged to the Free Human Alliance. The Federation had made their choice 50 years ago when they sent humanity into the void to die. Now humanity would make theirs. The quantum relay station at Kepler Junction had been humanity's greatest engineering achievement during their time in the Federation. Built into a massive asteroid, it coordinated faster-than-light travel for thousands of ships across 3 dozen star systems. Now it would become the symbol of their return to power. Emma Torres materialized inside the station's central control room through a portal that opened like a tear in reality itself. Around her, 6 other members of the strike team emerged from similar doorways, their advanced environmental suits designed for operations in hostile territory. The Federation guards never saw them coming. Control room secured, Emma reported into her quantum communicator. No casualties. The Axiom technicians are unconscious but alive. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy as hundreds of human strike teams appeared simultaneously at critical Federation installations. The operation, codenamed Homecoming, had been planned for 3 years. Every target had been scouted, every weakness identified, every contingency prepared for. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled across all frequencies as she broadcast from the Bridge of the Determination, which had just materialized in the heart of Federation space through a portal large enough to accommodate the massive vessel. Citizens of the Galactic Federation, Morrison's words reached every inhabited world simultaneously. This is Admiral Kate Morrison of the Free Human Alliance. 50 years ago, you tried to erase us from existence. Instead, you created something far stronger than you could have imagined. Emma worked quickly at the relay station's control systems, using access codes provided by their embedded agents. The technology was primitive compared to what humanity had developed in exile, but it still controlled the quantum tunneling network that connected the entire Federation. With a few keystrokes, she shut down the hyperspace lanes connecting the core worlds to the outer rim. Ships that had been traveling between systems found themselves stranded in normal space, their quantum drives suddenly useless. The galaxy, which had been united under Federation rule for 1,000 years, was now effectively cut in half. You separated us from our homes, Morrison continued her broadcast. Now we return the favor. Every hyperspace route in Federation territory is under our control. Every quantum communication relay answers to us. Every faster-than-light capable vessel is now grounded until further notice. The Federation's response was swift but uncoordinated. Axiom crystal cities began powering up their defensive systems, their geometric structures pulsing with angry light. Nebulan gas worlds released storms of charged particles that interfered with local communications. The collective's hive ships attempted to coordinate a response, but their queens couldn't communicate with each other across the distances involved. That was when they discovered how far humanity had advanced during their exile. Emma watched through the station's sensors as Federation warships tried to approach human positions using conventional propulsion. They moved like insects compared to the human vessels that could appear and disappear instantly through portal technology. Target the Axiom homeworld's power grid, came the order from Fleet Commander Lisa Okafor, whose tactical genius had been honed during decades of asteroid mining operations where one mistake meant death for everyone involved. Emma opened a portal directly into the crystalline city's central energy distribution center. Human engineers stepped through and began installing quantum dampening fields that caused the Axiom's perfect mathematical calculations to break down into chaos. The crystal being's technology depended on precise geometric relationships. When those relationships were disrupted, their entire civilization ground to a halt. Similar operations played out across Nebulan territory, where human atmospheric specialists introduced carefully designed compounds that neutralized the gas being's ability to maintain their environmental suits. The Nebulans found themselves trapped on their homeworlds, unable to survive in the space environments where they had once dominated. The collective proved more challenging because their hive minds could adapt quickly to changing circumstances. But humanity had learned something during their exile that the drones couldn't comprehend. Individual initiative, the ability to make independent decisions without consulting a central authority, gave human fighters an unpredictable advantage that the hive minds couldn't counter. General Alex Rivera led the ground operations that liberated slave colonies across the outer rim. The mammalian Ursan had been forced to work in the deepest mines because their powerful bodies could survive conditions that would crush other species. When Rivera's forces appeared through portals in their underground prisons, the bear-like beings initially thought they were hallucinating from gas poisoning. "You're free," Rivera told them in their own language, which human linguists had learned from intercepted communications. "The Federation's rule is over. Join us, and we'll make sure no one enslaves your people again." The aquatic Deepren had been similarly oppressed, forced to work in underwater facilities processing materials for nebulan atmospheric systems. When human liberation forces arrived in their flooded mining stations, many of the fish-like beings wept tears that mixed with the artificial seas of their prisons. Within days, the word spread through the galactic underground. Humanity hadn't returned as conquerors seeking revenge. They had come as liberators offering freedom to any species willing to stand with them against their former oppressors. Emma received reports of entire star systems switching sides as local populations rose up against Federation rule. The three dominant species had maintained control through fear and dependency, convincing subject races that they were too primitive to govern themselves. The sudden appearance of humans with technology that made Federation science look ancient shattered that illusion completely. "The core worlds are requesting negotiations," Dr. Ben Torres reported from his position aboard a scientific vessel that was studying captured Federation technology. "They want to discuss terms for a ceasefire." Morrison's response was broadcast across the galaxy for everyone to hear. "There will be no ceasefire. There will be no negotiations. There will be unconditional surrender, or there will be the complete dismantling of the Federation's power structure." The Axiom sent delegations offering trade agreements. The Nebulans proposed territorial divisions. The collective suggested forming a new council with human representation. All were rejected. "You had 2 centuries to treat us as equals," Morrison announced. "You chose to see us as disposable tools. Now you will discover what it means to be powerless, while others decide your fate." Emma looked out at the stars from the control room of the relay station that now served as a human command post. Ships from dozens of liberated species were arriving to offer their support to the Free Human Alliance. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had thought possible. The Federation's military might had been built on superior technology and coordinated tactics, but their technology was obsolete, and their coordination had collapsed when humans took control of their communication networks. More importantly, they had spent so long relying on human labor that they had forgotten how to do the basic work of maintaining their own civilization. Power grids failed because human technicians weren't there to perform routine maintenance. Food distribution systems collapsed because human logisticians weren't available to coordinate supply chains. Even simple manufacturing ground to a halt because the knowledge of how to operate the machinery had resided in human workers who were no longer present. The 3 ruling species had made themselves completely dependent on the people they had exiled. Now those people had returned with technology that made the Federation look like children playing with toys. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently, and there would be no going back to the old order. As Emma prepared for the next phase of operations, she thought about her parents who had died in the asteroid colonies, and her grandparents, who had been forced from their homes on Earth. They would never see the new galaxy that was being born from the ashes of the old. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. The crystal spires of the Axiom homeworld had stood for 10,000 years, their geometric perfection representing mathematical principles that the universe itself seemed to follow. Now those same spires lay dark and silent as David Kim worked to restore power to the planetary grid. The crystalline beings who had once ruled a third of the galaxy watched helplessly as a human engineer fixed problems their greatest minds couldn't solve. 6 months had passed since the Federation's collapse. The 3 ruling species had surrendered system by system as their infrastructure crumbled, and their populations faced starvation. The Axiom's mathematical models had proven useless when quantum dampening fields disrupted the precise calculations their technology required. The Nebulans couldn't maintain their atmospheric processors without the maintenance schedules human workers had developed. The collective's hive minds had fragmented when their queens lost contact with each other across the disabled communication networks. David finished installing the new power coupling, and stepped back as the crystal city began to glow with soft, blue light. Around him, young Axiom scholars watched in fascination as he explained the principles behind human engineering techniques. "Your ancestors made everything too complex," David told them in their harmonic language. "They thought perfection required perfect complexity, but the most elegant solutions are usually the simplest ones." The establishment of the Free Worlds Coalition had been surprisingly smooth once the shooting stopped. President Maya Reeves, elected by representatives from 47 different species, had set up the new government on Terra Nova, a world that existed partially in normal space and partially in the dark energy dimension humans had learned to access during their exile. The capital city was itself a marvel of human engineering, with buildings that phased in and out of visible reality and transportation networks that used portal technology to connect districts that might be thousands of miles apart. Beings from across the galaxy came to study the architecture that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Emma Torres had been promoted to Director of Integration Services, helping former Federation species adapt to life under the new system. Her office overlooked the great plaza where delegates from hundreds of worlds gathered daily to participate in a democracy that would have been impossible under the old hierarchy. "The Nebulan Agriculture Minister is here to see you," her assistant announced. The being who entered was a graceful humanoid made of swirling gases contained within an environmental suit. What made this meeting remarkable was that 6 months ago, Nebulans had considered all solid beings to be inferior life forms. "Director Torres," the minister spoke through a voice synthesizer, "my people need your help understanding soil composition analysis. Our atmospheric expertise is useless for food production on solid worlds." Emma smiled as she activated a holographic display showing crop rotation techniques human farmers had perfected. "Of course, but I'd like to learn about your weather manipulation abilities in exchange. My people are planning to terraform some dead worlds, and your knowledge could save us decades of work." This type of cooperation would have been unthinkable under Federation rule, where each species guarded their technological secrets jealously. The new coalition operated on principles of shared knowledge and mutual benefit. Every breakthrough was shared freely among member species, accelerating progress at an unprecedented rate. Engineer Paul Kim led the Portal Technology Distribution Program, carefully sharing the secrets of instantaneous travel with allied species while maintaining safeguards against misuse. The lessons of the Federation's fall weren't lost on humanity's leaders. They had learned that concentrating too much power in too few hands inevitably led to oppression and corruption. The Ursan Engineering Corps has requested portal generators for their construction projects, Paul reported during the weekly Coalition Council meeting. Their strength combined with our transportation technology could cut building times in half. President Reeves nodded approvingly. "Approved, but make sure they understand the maintenance requirements. We don't want any accidents." The former, oppressor species had been given a choice: integrate as equals in the new galaxy or remain isolated on their homeworlds. Most had chosen integration, discovering that cooperation yielded far greater benefits than domination ever had. The young Axiom scholars working with David represented a new generation that had grown up learning human engineering principles alongside their traditional mathematical approach. They combined crystalline precision with human adaptability, creating hybrid technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Similarly, Nebulan atmospheric scientists worked with human terraforming specialists to create new types of worlds that could support multiple forms of life simultaneously. The rigid environmental requirements that had once separated the species became opportunities for creative collaboration. The most dramatic transformation had occurred among the former collective drones. For the first time in their species' history, individual members were encouraged to think independently and develop personal interests. The results had been remarkable. Former drones became artists, philosophers, inventors, and explorers as they discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. Dr. Ben Torres continued pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge as the Coalition's chief researcher. His teams, now including brilliant minds from dozens of species, were working on projects that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Their latest breakthrough involved technology that could open gateways to other galaxies, potentially expanding the realm of freedom beyond their current borders. The quantum resonance patterns suggest we could establish stable portals to the Andromeda Galaxy, Torres reported to the Science Council. Imagine the possibilities if we could contact civilizations that developed completely independently from our own. But the humans who now led the coalition never forgot the most important lesson of their exile. Power corrupts, and even the most well-intentioned leaders could become oppressors if they held authority too long. That knowledge led to the creation of the Amendment of Remembrance, a revolutionary addition to the coalition constitution. Every 100 years, humanity would voluntarily surrender leadership of the coalition to another species for a full decade. This would ensure that no single group could ever again dominate the galaxy the way the Federation's ruling species had. It was a radical concept that many found difficult to understand, but the humans insisted it was essential for preventing future tyranny. Emma often walked through the memorial gardens on Terra Nova, where monuments honored the millions of humans who had died during the exile years. Their sacrifice had not been forgotten, but neither had the lessons their suffering had taught. The new galaxy would be built on principles of equality, cooperation, and shared responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on any of the human leaders. The Federation's attempt to eliminate them as a threat had instead created the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. By forcing humanity to unite and adapt, the ruling species had forged their own replacements. Trade routes that had taken weeks to navigate under Federation quantum tunneling now took minutes using human portal networks. Scientific research that had been restricted to approved species was now open to anyone with ideas to contribute. Worlds that had been classified as too dangerous for settlement were now being terraformed using techniques that combined the best knowledge from dozens of different civilizations. The galaxy was changing so rapidly that beings who remembered, the Federation often felt like they were living in a completely different universe. But the changes went deeper than just technology and politics. For the first time in centuries, every sapient being in coalition space had the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their species or origin. As Emma prepared for another day of meetings with delegates from newly liberated worlds, she reflected on how far they had all come. The frightened refugees who had been sent into the void to die had become the architects of a new and better civilization. They had proven that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from building something so much better that the old ways become irrelevant. The morning light of Terra Nova's binary stars filtered through the quantum-shifted atmosphere as Admiral Sarah Chen walked through the memorial gardens. She was the granddaughter of Robert Hayes, the captain who had led the first exile ships into the void a century ago. Now she commanded a fleet that could travel instantly to any point in the galaxy. But she never began a day without visiting the monuments to those who had died during the dark years. 25 years had passed since the establishment of the Free Worlds Coalition. The galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Where once 3 species had ruled over hundreds of others, now thousands of worlds participated as equals in the greatest democracy the universe had ever seen. The old rigid hierarchies had been replaced by a fluid system where merit and cooperation determined success rather than species origin or inherited power. Sarah touched the black stone memorial that bore her grandfather's name along with millions of others who had perished in the void. "We kept our promise," she whispered. "The rules really have changed." Her communicator chimed with an urgent message from the Deep Space Exploration Division. Dr. Marcus Webb, the Coalition's chief scientist, had made another breakthrough in intergalactic portal technology. The first stable gateway to the Andromeda Galaxy had been established, and contact had been made with civilizations that had developed completely independently from their own. Sarah made her way to the Coalition Council chambers, where delegates from across known space were gathering for the weekly assembly. The great circular hall was a marvel of architecture that existed partially in normal space and partially in folded dimensions, allowing beings from radically different environments to participate in the same physical location. President Coral Song occupied the leadership podium, her aquatic form gracefully moving within a specialized environmental chamber. She was a Deeprin, one of the species humanity had liberated from Federation slavery. Her election to lead the coalition represented everything the New Order stood for. Intelligence, compassion, and wisdom mattered more than what form of life someone had been born into. "The Andromeda contact has exceeded all expectations," President Coralsong announced to the assembled delegates. Their civilizations developed entirely different approaches to technology and social organization. The knowledge exchange opportunities are unlimited. Sarah took her place among the military advisors as Dr. Webb presented his findings through holographic displays that showed the alien galaxy in stunning detail. Civilizations that had never heard of quantum tunneling or portal technology had, instead, mastered biological engineering and living spacecraft. Others had developed collective consciousness networks that made the old Federation's collective look primitive by comparison. They're eager to establish formal diplomatic relations, Webb reported, but they want to understand our governmental system first. The concept of voluntary power transfer is completely foreign to them. The Amendment of Remembrance remained the Coalition's most radical innovation. In just 5 years, humanity would surrender leadership to another species for a full decade. Many of the Andromeda civilizations found this idea incomprehensible. Why would the most powerful species voluntarily give up control? The answer lay in the lessons humanity had learned during their century of exile and return. Power concentrated, too long in any group's hands inevitably led to corruption and oppression. The Federation's ruling species had started with good intentions, but centuries of unchallenged authority had made them arrogant and blind to the suffering of those they controlled. The Andromedan delegation will arrive next month, Coralsong continued. Admiral Chen will command the escort fleet that brings them through the intergalactic portal. After the assembly, Sarah met with her senior staff to coordinate the unprecedented mission. Commander Lisa Park, her tactical officer, had been born on one of the exile colonies and shared Sarah's understanding of how much their people had sacrificed to reach this point. The portal generators can handle ships up to cruiser size, Park reported, but the Andromeda vessels use completely different power systems. We'll need to modify our approach procedures. Sarah nodded, studying the technical specifications of the alien ships. They were grown rather than built, shaped from living materials that could adapt to different environments. The engineering principles were so foreign that human scientists were still trying to understand the basic concepts involved. The preparations took weeks, but finally the day arrived when the first beings from another galaxy would set foot in Coalition space. Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Unity, as they approached the massive portal generator floating in the void between Terra Nova and its nearest moon. The gateway itself was a marvel of human engineering enhanced by contributions from every member species of the Coalition. Crystalline axiom components provided mathematical precision for the quantum calculations. Nebulan atmospheric processors created the environmental fields that protected the portal's delicate mechanisms. Former collective drones worked in perfect coordination to maintain the energy flows that kept the interdimensional doorway stable. Andromeda Fleet, this is Admiral Chen of the Coalition Defense Forces. You are cleared for portal transit. The alien ships emerged like living creatures swimming through space itself. Their organic hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that served as both decoration and communication method. The largest vessel was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in what looked like metallic forests that moved with their own internal rhythm. Welcome to the Milky Way, Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. We are honored to meet you. The response came in harmonies that human vocal cords couldn't reproduce, but the universal translators converted the meaning into words. We bring greetings from the spiral gardens of Andromeda. Your coalition's reputation for fairness and cooperation has reached even our distant realm. The formal ceremonies took place on Terra Nova, in the great plaza where delegates from both galaxies could meet, face to face. Sarah watched as beings who had evolved under completely different stars shared knowledge and experiences that would benefit civilizations for generations to come. But the most meaningful moment came when the Andromedan ambassador, a crystalline entity that communicated through light patterns, asked about the exile monuments in the memorial gardens. These represent your greatest failure. The ambassador's light pulses were translated as words. Why do you honor failure? Sarah smiled as she explained the real meaning of the memorials. They don't represent failure, they represent the price of wisdom. Every being remembered here died so that we could learn the most important lesson in the universe, that true strength comes from lifting others up. not keeping them down. The ambassadors' light patterns shifted to what their translators identified as profound respect. In our galaxy, the strong consume the weak. We thought this was the natural order, but you have proven that cooperation creates more strength than domination ever could. Over the following months, the cultural exchange between galaxies accelerated, beyond anyone's expectations. Andromedan biotechnology combined with coalition portal science to create living ships that could traverse interdimensional space. Human adaptive engineering merged with alien collective consciousness techniques to develop new forms of democratic participation that allowed millions of beings to contribute to decisions simultaneously. Sarah often found herself thinking about the journey humanity had taken, from disposable workers grateful for any scraps the Federation would throw them, to the architects of the greatest alliance the universe had ever seen. The transformation had cost them everything they once thought they wanted but had given them something far more valuable, the knowledge of what they were truly capable of achieving. The old Federation species had found their place in the new order as well. Young Axiom engineers worked alongside human technicians, combining mathematical precision with adaptive creativity. Nebulan atmospheric scientists collaborated with terraforming specialists from dozens of worlds to create new types of planets that could support multiple forms of life. Former collective drones had become some of the galaxy's most innovative artists and philosophers as they discovered the power of individual thought. But perhaps the most important change was in the fundamental rules that governed galactic civilization. The Coalition Constitution enshrined principles that would have been revolutionary under Federation rule: equality regardless of species origin, shared access to knowledge and technology, and the absolute prohibition against using superior power to oppress weaker beings. Dr. Webb's latest project involved creating a permanent gateway network connecting multiple galaxies, allowing instantaneous travel and communication across distances that would have taken millions of years to cross using conventional methods. The universe was becoming smaller and more connected with each passing day. The Magellanic Cloud civilizations have agreed to join the Intergalactic Alliance, Webb reported during the monthly science briefing. They're contributing knowledge about dark matter manipulation that could revolutionize energy production across all member galaxies. Sarah reviewed the reports from across coalition space with satisfaction. Crime rates were at historic lows because beings who had purpose and opportunity rarely turned to destructive behavior. Scientific advancement was accelerating as knowledge flowed freely between species that had once guarded their secrets jealously. Most importantly, no child in coalition space would ever experience the desperation and fear that had driven humanity to greatness through suffering. The transformation wasn't complete, and probably never would be. There were still isolated systems that clung to old authoritarian ways. Rogue groups occasionally tried to establish new hierarchies based on species superiority. But the coalition's response was always the same: offer integration as equals, or face isolation until they were ready to embrace better principles. As Sarah prepared for another diplomatic mission to a newly contacted civilization in the Triangulum Galaxy, she stopped once more at her grandfather's memorial. The inscription below his name read, "He died believing his people had been defeated. He lived long enough to see them reborn as something greater." The galaxy's newest members often asked how humanity had managed to create such a successful alliance after suffering such devastating exile. The answer was both simple and complex. They had learned that true victory didn't come from defeating your enemies, but from building something so much better that the old ways became obsolete. The Federation had tried to remove humanity from the galactic equation. Instead, they had forced them to become the variable that changed everything. The exiled workers who had once begged for acceptance had returned as leaders who didn't need to beg for anything. They had the strength to take whatever they wanted, but the wisdom to build something that benefited everyone instead. Now, as ships from dozens of galaxies gathered at Terra Nova for the first Intergalactic Unity Summit, the universe itself seemed brighter. The darkness between the stars was being bridged by networks of light and cooperation that connected civilizations across impossible distances. The void that had once been humanity's prison had become the foundation for the greatest alliance in cosmic history. Sarah boarded her flagship for another mission, another chance to spread the principles that had transformed a galaxy. The Unity's engines hummed with power that came from the willing cooperation of 1,000 different species, each contributing their unique knowledge to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. As they disappeared through a portal toward unknown stars, the memorial gardens remained behind on Terra Nova, tended by beings from across the universe who came to honor those who had died so that freedom could be born. The inscription at the Po Garden's entrance, written in every known language, carried a simple message. They tried to remove us. Now we make the rules. And across the infinite cosmos, those rules were spreading like light through the darkness, carrying the promise that no being would ever again be forced to choose between freedom and survival. The exiles had come home, at last, not to the worlds they had lost, but to the universe they had won.